We live in an era that worships the sleek, the digital, and the instantaneous. We measure success by the height of glass skyscrapers and the speed of fiber optic cables. But beneath the glittering surface of the modern world lies a forgotten layer of dust, grease, and sweat. It is a layer inhabited by those who speak the language of the old gods. The gods of gears, levers, and light. Deep in the subterranean dark beneath an old, crumbling apartment complex, 52-year-old has sits at his workbench. The air here is thick with the heavy scent of industrial lubricating oil, turpentine, and aged paper. Shadows dance across rows of mechanical skeletons, disassembled projectors, brass microscope, and heavy glass lenses. As faces a map of deep, weathered lines, etched by decades of intense concentration and squinting into harsh light sources. His hands are thick and rough, stained permanently at the cuticles with black printer ink and mechanical grease. He holds a tiny screwdriver, his hand trembling slightly as he attempts to adjust a microscopic screw inside an ancient optical lens alignment system. He blinks heavily. His vision blurs. The tiny screw splits into two, then three shimmering shapes. He stops, sighs softly, and rubs his eyes with the back of his stained wrist. The silver scar across his knuckles catches the faint, amber light of the desk lamp. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of the basement is kicked open. The rusted iron hinges shriek in protest. 28-year-old Khan, the project director of New Horizon Real Estate Corporation, steps into the room. He wears a tailored navy blue suit, his hair immaculately shelled, his expensive leather shoes clicking sharply on the damp concrete floor. Behind him stand two large men in dark security uniforms, carrying heavy clipboards and eviction notices. Khan looks around the workshop with visible disgust, holding a silk handkerchief to his nose to block the smell of oil. He chuckles coldly, tapping a glossy leather folder against the edge of Ha's desk. He asks if Ha is still breathing in this tomb, claiming the entire block is being wiped clean for a multi-million-dollar commercial complex. He tells Ha that this basement is slated to become part of the central waste management and septic line. Ha does not look up from his work. His voice is low and steady, like the deep hum of an old power transformer. He states that the equipment in this room has outlived 3 corporate dynasties. He tells Khan that it is not garbage, but precision. Something Khan's generation sells for scrap value. Raises his head, his eyes clouded but resolute. He declares that the compensation package offered by New Horizon is an insult. It would not even cover a 6-month lease for a closet in the outer districts, let alone a functional optical workshop. He notes that he has lived here for 40 years. His daughter grew up here, and he will not sign away her roof for pennies. Khan leans down, placing both hands on the desk and invading Ha's space. He sneers that Ha is not negotiating from a position of strength. He calls a relic and a blind man fixing dead machines. He warns that Ha has exactly 1 week before the heavy machinery rolls in. He promises that if Ha signs the voluntary handover today, a small bonus might be added from a personal discretionary fund. If not, he hints that accidents happen during demolition, power lines fail, and water mains burst. Before I can respond, his ancient, scratched smartphone, sitting in a saucer of oil, begins to vibrate violently. The screen displays the name, My Light. I looks at Khan, his expression hardening. He picks up the phone and presses it to his ear. He asks if Mai is done with her internship work at the firm. From the other end of the line, a choked, agonizing sob breaks through the speaker. It is a sound of absolute structural collapse. Mai cries out that everything is gone, completely gone. A stands up instantly, his stool scraping loudly against the concrete floor. He demands to know what happened and asks if she is hurt. Mai explains that her project, her final graduation thesis blueprint, is destroyed. She was in the New Horizon intern archives room, preparing her final presentation materials for tomorrow morning. Someone left a 2-liter container of industrial printer ink compound right next to her drafting table. It tipped over and ran across the entire 2-meter canvas. The heavy ink has soaked through the fibers, completely blacking out the hand-drawn structural details. She whimpers that the defense panel convenes at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. If she cannot submit the physical copy, she fails the entire 5-year degree and loses her scholarship. Khan watches Ha's face, a slow, subtle, sadistic smirk spreading across his lips. He adjusts his luxury watch and shifts his cuffs, enjoying the old man's agony. Ha's voice trembles, but he tries desperately to remain a pillar of stability for his daughter. He tells Mai to take a deep breath and pack the blueprint immediately. He warns her not to wipe it with a wet cloth, as it will only spread the petroleum base. He orders her to put it in the waterproof tube and come straight down to the basement. He commands her to come home to her father. Mai whispers despondently that there is no point, because the professor said a hand-drawn blueprint on heavy rag paper cannot be recovered once ink saturates it. She says the ink stain is the size of a human body, and it is over. Ha speaks with the absolute authority of an old master, telling her that her father is still alive. As long as he has breath, nothing she builds will ever be truly destroyed. He hangs up the phone, his chest heaving with deep emotion. He looks at Khan, whose smile has now widened into a victorious grin. Khan mocks the situation, calling it a tragedy. He remarks that architectural blueprints are so delicate, especially those old-fashioned, hand-drawn ones that the university's traditionalist faction loves so much. He sneers that if she had used digital files like a normal person, she could just hit print again. He concludes that 5 years of tuition are gone down the drain, just like this workshop. Ha's voice drops to a dangerous ice register. He stares directly at the young executive and tells Khan that he did this. Khan raises his hands in mock innocence, claiming he does not handle printer toner. He calls it a remarkable coincidence and says, the universe is telling them when it is time to quit fighting progress. He urges her to sign the paper, take the money, and use it to pay for her remedial classes next year. Khan slides the pen across the desk until it rests against Ha's scarred knuckles. He tells her to sign it and save himself the final humiliation. Arrogance is a strange form of blindness. It looks at a man covered in grease and sees a servant. It looks at an old tool and sees trash. It assumes that, because someone does not possess wealth, they do not possess power. Khan looked at Ha and saw a defeated old animal trapped in a dark hole. He did not know that the hole was actually a fortress, and the old man was a keeper of vaster secrets than money could ever buy. 20 years ago, the basement was not this cold. The light was different then, filtered through the laughter of a 4-year-old Mai who rode high on her father's shoulders. I had shown her a simple glass prism, placing it right where a single beam of harsh white light broke through the high street level grate. The little girl had laughed, her tiny fingers reaching out to catch the brilliant, dancing rainbow that split across the damp concrete wall. I had told her then that the world would try to say dark places have no beauty. He had whispered that if you have the right lens, and if you know how to position the light, you can find a rainbow anywhere. But the present-day basement holds no rainbows, only the cold stench of reality. Khan stands over the workbench, his expensive gold-plated pen waiting like a vulture's beak over the eviction documents. He slowly reaches out and picks up the pen. Khan's eyes light up with predatory satisfaction, expecting the old man to finally break. Instead, Ha places the heavy metal pen directly into the jaws of a heavy steel bench vice next to his right hand. With one swift, powerful twist of his scarred wrist, Ha turns the iron handle. The expensive pen snaps with a sharp, echoing crack, leaking dark blue ink onto the silver metal threads of the machine. Ha looks directly into Khan's eyes, his voice steady as he tells the young executive to get out of his shop. Khan's face darkens instantly, his playful smirk twisting into a snarl. He calls Ha a senile old fool, warning him that he has just thrown away the only lifeline he will ever get. He sneers that Ha is not a hero, but a parasite clinging to a rotting tooth. He tells Ha to enjoy the darkness while it lasts, because tomorrow morning he will personally watch the excavators tear the cellar ceiling open. Khan turns on his heel, motioning sharply to his security guards. As they march out, Khan orders them to call the utility management subcontractor. He demands that they report a suspected safety hazard in the basement line and cut the main power grid link for the building by 9 p.m. He laughs, saying they will see how much precision the old man can manage in the pitch-black dark. The heavy iron door slams shut, leaving Ha alone in the gathering shadows. He takes a deep, ragged breath, his shoulders sagging slightly under the immense weight of the coming storm. He walks over to the deepest corner of the room, where a large, bulky object sits covered by a thick, oil-stained canvas tarp. He pulls the tarp away, revealing a massive, industrial-grade optical projector from the 1980s. It is a Carl Zeiss Jena double-lens refraction system manufactured in East Germany. It is a masterpiece of pure analog engineering, with a heavy cast iron body, massive hand-ground quartz lenses, and a complex network of brass dials. For 15 years, had kept this mechanical giant alive through sheer willpower and meticulous care. To the modern digital world, it was an oversized paperweight, a useless relic of a forgotten time. To Ha, it was a mathematical miracle, a machine capable of projecting an image with such pure optical fidelity that not a single millimeter of spatial distortion occurred. Ha caresses the cold iron body of the projector, his thumb tracing a deep, jagged scar on the wooden alignment ruler attached to the base. 30 years ago, when Ha was a young apprentice at the State Mapping Bureau, a massive electrical fire had broken out in the main archives. While others fled in terror, Ha and his elderly mentor had stayed behind in the smoke. They used their own bodies to shield the original land survey master blueprints of the city from the falling embers. A piece of burning structural timber had fallen across Ha's arm and this very ruler, leaving a permanent mark on both. That night, they saved the structural history of the city. The young assistant, who had run out first, abandoning the archives to save his own skin, was a terrified man named Nguyen. Through decades of political maneuvering and corporate alliances, that same Nguyen was now the supreme chairman of New Horizon Real Estate Corporation. But I had never spoken of that night to anyone, not even to Mike. He did not care about corporate titles or boardrooms. He only cared about the precision of the work. Suddenly, The basement door flies open again, and Mai bursts into the room. She is drenched in sweat and cold rain, her eyes swollen red from crying. Her hands shake violently as she clutches a long, black plastic blueprint tube against her chest, like a shield. She looks at her father, her knees giving out slightly from sheer exhaustion and despair. I catches her instantly in his thick arms, holding her tightly against his chest as she begins to sob into his shoulder. She cries that it is ruined, completely blacked out by a heavy industrial synthetic ink blend. She explains that the fluid is sticky, smells like gasoline, and covers the entire central axis of her park design. She whimpers that the master pavilion and the preservation grid she spent 6 months calculating by hand are buried under a black sea. I gently strokes her hair, his face grave, but his hands remaining steady. He tells her to lay it out on the master alignment table, because he needs to see what the darkness has done. There is a specific kind of despair that belongs only to the Creator. To spend months, even years, pouring your entire soul into a single object, giving up sleep, giving up food, and sacrificing your sanity to make something truly beautiful, only to watch it be defaced in a single second by pure malice or absolute carelessness. It feels like a murder of the mind. Mai felt that exact murder as she unrolled the massive canvas sheet across the master alignment table. The paper is thick, high quality, professional grade 200 GSM, drafting cotton paper. On the outer edges, beautiful, hyper-precise architectural script and cross-sectional drawings of historical brickwork are still visible. But as the eye moves to the center, a horrific sight appears. A massive, jagged, oily puddle of deep black printer ink covers nearly 70% of the entire document. It has already dried into a thick, reflective, synthetic crust. It completely obscures the thousands of fine, hand-drawn ink lines beneath its surface. Mai covers her mouth, fresh tears slipping through her fingers and dropping onto the cold, concrete floor. She whispers to her father that you cannot even see the alignment marks anymore. She gasps that the university jury will not even look at it tomorrow morning. They will think she did not finish the work and tried to cover up her failure with a cheap accident. She cries out that Khan looked directly at her when it happened and told her that sometimes dreams just dissolve. She explains that Khan wanted this destruction to happen because her project proves that the old neighborhood does not need to be demolished. Her research shows it can be integrated into the new design without destroying the heritage buildings. Her project stands directly in the way of his profit margin. Approaches the table slowly, adjusting his magnifying loupe and examining the very edge of the dense ink stain. His face remains grave, but his voice does not waver. He notes that the ink is a petroleum-based polymer. It dries rapidly on the surface, forming a dense crystalline shield that blocks all visible light. To the human eye, it looks like a solid black wall. But he whispers that every ink has a specific weakness. Every liquid has a unique molecular density, and every light wave has a way of finding what lies beneath. Suddenly, with a sharp, explosive pop, the single incandescent bulb hanging from the basement ceiling goes out. The low hum of the old refrigerator stops instantly. The small cooling fan grinds to a sudden halt. The entire basement workshop is plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. The only remaining sound is the heavy, relentless patter of rain against the small, dirt-caked iron grating near the ceiling. Mai panics, her voice rising in the dark as she cries out that they have cut the power lines. She asks her father what they can possibly do now, when they do not even have enough light to see their own hands. She screams that there is no time left, because it is already 9 o'clock at night, and the offense is in 11 hours. Ha's voice cuts through her panic like a lighthouse beam, cutting through a thick ocean fog. He tells her to look at him, or rather, to just listen to his voice. He states that when a man spends 30 years in a basement, he does not need eyes to know exactly where the tools are. He orders her to stay exactly where she is and not to move a single inch. In the absolute darkness, the rhythmic, deliberate sound of Ha's heavy boots echoes across the concrete floor. The distinct metallic click of a heavy iron latch vibrates through the dark room. It is followed by the heavy drag of an iron chain and the sharp thud of a deep cycle marine battery being dropped onto the wooden workbench. A bright blue spark flashes in the dark as Ha strikes heavy jumper cables against copper terminals. A low, powerful, mechanical groan echoes through the cellar as Ha boots up a vintage rotary power inverter. A moment later, a sharp, blinding beam of intense, amber-colored light cuts through the pitch-black room. The light does not come from the ceiling, but shoots directly from the massive twin lenses of the Carl Zeiss projector. The light is so highly concentrated that the floating dust motes in the air look like a swarm of shooting stars. Ha stands tall behind the machine, his weathered face fully illuminated by the powerful glow of a high-pressure halogen bulb. He turns a massive iron wheel on the side of the projector chassis, adjusting the focal length. The intense beam hits the ruined blueprint canvas perfectly, turning the black puddle into a glowing circle. Ha states that they think that by cutting the wire, they can cut their capacity to see. He notes that they forget the sun is just a bigger lamp, and human ingenuity invented the light bulb before corporations invented the electric bill. He orders her to bring him the chemical kit from the third shelf behind the lathe, the one marked with the faded blue cross. Mai wipes her eyes, her hope rekindling slightly as she watches her father's iron resolve in the amber glow. She asks what he is going to do with the chemical kit. Ha looks at the paper and says they are going to perform an optical autopsy on this corporate lie. He declares that they are going to make the black ink completely invisible and extract her future from the dark. The modern world relies heavily on software to fix human mistakes. If a line is drawn wrong, you press Ctrl-Z. If a shadow is misplaced on a screen, you simply change a setting in a program. But when you are dealing with physical reality, with raw ink, dense paper, and unyielding time, you cannot rely on virtual commands. You must rely entirely on the ancient laws of physics. You must know exactly how material elements interact at a molecular level. Ha did not know how to use a computer, but he knew the internal soul of glass and the deepest secrets of optical refraction. The pungent, sharp aroma of the natural pine resin and distilled turpentine cuts through the damp air of the basement workshop. The intense burning heat from the massive twin lenses of the East German Carl Zeiss projector causes the thick, oily black ink puddle on the canvas to shimmer. It casts a strange, oily purple sheen under the concentrated amber beam. Ha approaches the table slowly, holding the glowing glass beaker filled with his amber chemical mixture. Mai watches him with wide, frightened eyes, her breathing shallow as she smells the industrial solvent. She asks her father if that fluid will dissolve the paper completely. Ha shakes his head, his face illuminated by the bright beam of the arc lamp. He explains that this paper is made of long-chain cotton fibers, meaning it is incredibly tough. he noticed that it can survive water, acid, and decades of time. The synthetic printer ink, however, is a short-chain polymer that binds heavily to itself rather than the cotton fibers. He warns that if they apply the solution directly to the front, it will smear and destroy the fine drawing underneath forever. But he whispers that if they use high-intensity light to find the exact boundaries, they can treat the paper from the reverse side safely. With extreme care, using his thick, grease-stained fingers, Hud gently flips the massive 2-meter canvas blueprint face down onto the glass plate of the alignment table. Now, the horrific black ink stain is on the bottom, pressing directly against the cold glass. The completely blank, white back of the thick cotton paper is facing upward toward the ceiling. Under the normal light of the desk lamp, it looks like nothing more than a vast, dark, shapeless shadow soaking through the paper. He reaches down to the lower chassis of the Zeiss projector, his rough fingers turning a set of heavy, mechanical brass dials. With a sharp metallic click, it swings a large, deep blue glass filter directly in front of the primary light lens. Instantly, the warm amber beam transforms into a sharp, monochromatic, high-frequency, indigo-violet light wave. The blue beam floods the back of the blueprint. I tells Mai to look closely and ask her what she can see. Mai leans down over the wooden edge of the table, her eyes widening in absolute astonishment as she stares at the paper surface. Under this specific wavelength of blue-filtered light, the thick, petroleum-based black ink on the other side begins to behave differently. Because the synthetic ink contains a high concentration of industrial carbon derivatives, it absorbs the blue light completely. It appears through the paper as a dead, pitch black, void, a solid wall of darkness. However, the original drawing lines contain unique metal oxides because Mai had used traditional iron gall black ink and a fine-tipped technical pen. These old-world metal oxides fluoresce faintly when hit by high-intensity ultraviolet adjacent light waves. Through the thick, the heavy backing of the cotton drafting paper, tiny, ghost-like, shimmering silver lines begin to appear directly within the dark shadow. They look like distant stars suddenly showing through a narrow break in heavy storm clouds. The entire Lost Master Pavilion, the preservation grid lines, and the thousands of fine measurement markings are visible as faint, luminous pathways. They are trapped perfectly beneath the heavy black corporate crust. Mai gasps, her voice trembling with pure awe as she whispers that her structural pillars are still there. She sees the scale markings clearly and realizes they are not destroyed, but merely hidden. Al looks at her, a faint, proud smile touching his weathered lips, though his forehead is slick with heavy sweat. He states that nothing drawn with absolute truth is ever completely lost in this world. He notes that the light always knows exactly where the silver is hidden. But his shoulders droop slightly as he admits that his own eyes cannot trace these fine, glowing lines for much longer. The heavy blur is coming back into his vision, and his eyes are tearing from the glare. He hands her a technical pen and tells her that he needs her to hold it. He promises that he will guide the light beam, millimeter by millimeter, and she will trace the reflection from the back. A pulls his old, notched limewood ruler from his belt, the one carrying the deep scar from the archive fire 30 years ago. He lays it across the glowing paper surface as a straight edge. His thick hands are shaking noticeably now, as the severe effort of fighting his failing eyesight and the coldness cellar takes a physical toll. He grips the heavy brass knobs of the projector's micro-adjustment stage, his knuckles turning pure white under the strain. He tells her that they have exactly 4 hours before the chemical stability of the marine battery bank degrades completely. He reminds her that Khan thinks he has put them to sleep in the dark. He declares that it is time to show the executives what happens when the basement wakes up. Time is a fluid concept when you are comfortable. A 4-hour movie passes in a flash. A 4-hour delay at an airport is an annoyance. But when 4 hours represents the narrow gate between a life of dignity and a life of failure, every second drops like a heavy iron anvil. For Ha and Mai, the dark basement workshop becomes a crucible, where every single tick of the clock feels like a physical blow. The tip of Mai's drafting pen, a fine 0.18 millimeter rapidograph, moves with extreme speed and precision across the back of the paper. She follows the faint, glowing silver lines revealed by the deep blue light beam. Her hand remains steady, driven by pure adrenaline and the quiet, monumental presence of her father, standing beside her. Ha stands like an iron statue, but his physical body is failing him rapidly. The massive halogen bulb inside the Carl Zeiss projector generates an immense, suffocating heat. The heavy cast iron housing of the machine radiates warmth like an industrial furnace, making the small basement room hot and stifling despite the cold rain outside. Worse, the low-voltage marine battery bank is straining severely under the massive power draw. The old rotary inverter emits a high-pitched, agonizing whine that fills the small room and vibrates through their teeth. The amber blue light flickers slightly every few minutes, giving a silent warning that the chemical energy is running out. Ha's voice is strained, his eyes bloodshot and tearing heavily from the intense glare of the blue light wave. He tells Mai to keep moving, noting that they are approaching Section 4, which contains the historical gateway arch. He states that the radius of the curve is exactly 45 millimeters from the central datum line. He asks if she can still see the silver glow through the cotton paper. Mai traces furiously, her fingers cramped into painful claws, her skin covered in black graphite and sweat. She answers that she can see it clearly, and she is tracking the net lines right now. But she gasps that the light is shifting slightly on the table. She warns that the lens is drifting because of the thermal expansion of the iron frame. Ha looks at the secondary lens assembly through his loupe. The extreme heat has caused the heavy brass retention ring to expand a fraction of a millimeter, causing the focus to soften. The vital silver lines below are blurring into a formless gray shadow. Ha notes that the focus is slipping away. He warns that if the lines blur completely, she will miscalculate the structural load values, and the design will be technically invalid. Mai asks if they can turn the projector off for 10 minutes to let the brass chassis cool down. Ha firmly shakes his head in the dark. He explains that if they turn it off, the battery plates will cool instantly and drop their voltage baseline below the threshold. The inverter will trip its internal safety circuit, and they will not be able to restart the arc lamp in the dark. He declares that they must keep going, and he will stabilize the lens manually. Ha looks at the glowing, blistering metal heat sink fin assembly at the very back of the lens housing. It glows with a faint, dangerous, dull orange hue under the shroud. Without a single moment of hesitation, Ha reaches out his bare right hand. He does not use a protective cloth, because he needs the absolute, microscopic tactile feedback of his bare skin to make the fractional millimeter adjustments to the focus ring. His bare hand presses directly against the white-hot iron fin. A sharp, agonizing sound of a skin meeting hot metal echoes through the room. Ha's jaw tightens instantly into a rigid line. A deep, powerful grunt of intense pain escapes his locked teeth, but his thick arm does not flinch a single millimeter. His fingers, despite the blistering heat tearing through his flesh, remain rock solid as he turns the brass collar a fraction of a degree. On the glass table below, the blurry silver lines snap back into hyper-sharp, diamond-like clarity. Mai screams in absolute horror, dropping her rapidograph pen onto the workbench. She cries out to her father, begging him to stop because he is burning his hand off. Ha's face turns completely pale, massive beads of cold sweat rolling down his cheeks in the blue glow. His bare hand remains locked onto the burning metal chassis to keep the image from shifting a single hair. He commands her to draw, telling her not to look at his hand, but to look only at the paper. He shouts that his hand will heal in a month, but if she drops that pen, 5 years of her life will die tonight in this hole. He orders her to draw. A father's love is never truly expressed in beautiful speeches or expensive corporate gifts. It is measured in the quiet capacity to bear immense weight for another. It is measured in the silent willingness to burn oneself, so that his child can walk through the fire untouched. Khan bought his position with his father's corporate stock options and a clean suit. Mai's future was being forged right here in the dark, paid for by the very skin of her father's palm. Driven by a mixture of terror, love, and fierce determination, Mai grabs her pen again. Her movements become superhumanly fast and precise. She does not just trace the silver lines, she pours every ounce of her training, her memory of the design, and her love for her father into the paper. The metal tip scratches against the cotton paper like a frantic, living heartbeat. Outside the high street level grate, the first pale, gray light of dawn begins to filter through the mist. The rain has finally stopped, replaced by a cold morning fog. Inside the basement workshop, the old rotary inverter gives one final, long dying shriek. The halogen arc bulb flares with a brilliant, blinding flash of pure white light, and then, with a soft click, dies completely. The room is left in the dim, gray shadows of the morning. Mai drops her pen, standing completely frozen as she stares down at the massive canvas. The 2-meter blueprint is finished. The back of the paper is now a flawless, stunning, hand-drawn masterpiece of architectural design, executed in perfect black lines. Because it was traced from the reverse side, the entire layout is a perfectly mirrored, structurally flawless reproduction of her original work. It is clean, unsmudged, and bears a raw technical clarity that no computer software could ever replicate. On the front side, the ugly dried black puddle of corporate ink remains like a dead scar. But on the back, the blueprint is fully alive. Mai whispers, her voice cracked with emotion, that they actually did it. She turns to look at her father. Sa sits heavily on his old wooden stool, his right hand already wrapped in a scrap of clean cotton cloth that is staining with clear fluid from the deep burns. His eyes are closed, his breathing deep and exhausted in the gray light. But as he hears her voice, he opens his cloudy eyes and smiles a faint, tired smile. He tells her to pack it into the tube, calling her his light. He notes that the clock says 7:15 in the morning, meaning the university gates are open. He tells her to go and show them what the basement can build. There is a specific moment in every great battle where the powerful believe they have already won the war. They look at the scoreboard, they look at their expensive weapons, and they begin to celebrate their victory early. They do not realize that the universe operates on a system of deeply hidden, unyielding balances. A single seed planted 30 years ago in the thick mud can grow a root strong enough to shatter a concrete foundation today. The grand auditorium of the University of Architecture is magnificent, filled with tiered mahogany seating and bright floodlights. A long, imposing judge's table covered in expensive leather blotters dominates the center of the main stage area. Sitting at the very center of the review panel are 4 senior professors dressed in formal academic robes. Sitting directly next to them, as the honorary guest and chief sponsor, is 58-year-old Chairman Nguyen. He is the absolute ruler of New Horizon Real Estate Corporation, looking stern in his bespoke gray suit with a small gold lapel pin. Standing confidently at the side of the stage, leaning his shoulder against a polished marble pillar, is Kang. He holds a warm cup of premium coffee in his right hand, a smug, completely relaxed look plastered across his face. The university auditor steps to the central microphone and calls out the next candidate for the morning session. The auditor announces candidate number 14, Maiha, defending her thesis topic titled The Living Archive. The document describes a spatial strategy for integrating historical urban fabrics within modern commercial frameworks. Mai steps onto the bright stage with steady steps, looking exhausted from the long night of labor in the cellars. Her clothes are still slightly damp from the morning mist, and her hair is tied back hastily with a simple band. Her leather boots are worn, carrying a faint, unmistakable trace of basement lubricating oil on the lower soles. She holds the long plastic blueprint tube tightly in her arms as she approaches the wooden display board. Khan whispers audibly to a corporate subordinate standing nearby, mocking her appearance and laughing at her empty hands. He remarks to his assistant that this is exactly where the comedy begins because she does not even have a digital slide presentation. Mai approaches the massive display board without saying a word, pulling the long, thick canvas sheet from the tube. With deliberate, perfectly calm movements, she pins the massive blueprint to the wooden board, completely backward. She displays the pristine, hand-drawn side that she and her father had painstakingly traced through the dark hours. The 4 senior professors lean forward instantly, murmuring to one another in absolute astonishment at the sight. The sheer density of the hand-drawn technical detail on the paper is staggering to the entire room. The lines are incredibly sharp, executed with an old-school precision that has almost vanished from modern universities. The head professor adjusts his glasses, leaning closer to examine the hatching on the load-bearing arches. He states that this is master-class draftsmanship, far superior to any digital simulation he has seen this year. But he frowns slightly and asks Miss Mai why the paper is inverted, noting a heavy dark shadow visible through the core. Before Mai can open her mouth to answer, Khan steps forward from the sidelines of the auditorium stage. He interrupts the academic proceedings with the smooth, unctuous confidence of a major corporate donor. He addresses the distinguished members of the jury and Chairman Nguyen, claiming he must speak as the internship director. He declares that, while the drawing looks impressive at first glance, the panel is witnessing a case of massive academic fraud. The jury murmurs in confusion as Chairman Nguyen raises an eyebrow, his gaze shifting sharply from Khan to the canvas. Khan walks up to the board, pointing a bright red laser pointer directly at the dark shadow soaking through the paper fibers. He states that yesterday afternoon, Miss Mai suffered an unfortunate accident at the New Horizon corporate office. He claims she spilled a massive 2-liter container of commercials printer ink directly onto her project canvas. He tells the professors that the front of this sheet is completely ruined, blacked out, and structurally invalid. He sneers that she has simply flipped the paper over and used a chemical trick to make the ruin look like a design. He asserts that this is not a valid thesis, but a desperate salvage job from a student trying to hide her negligence. He emphasizes that she has no digital backups or verified files, calling it a fairy tale drawn in a dark hole. The second professor looks at Mai with a stern expression, asking her if the original face of the document is truly destroyed. Mai stands tall under the bright floodlights, her voice clear, resonant, and completely devoid of any fear. She answers that the front of this document is indeed covered in dark ink, just as the director stated. But she declares that the design the panel is looking at is not a trick or a product of academic negligence. She explains that every line, every calculation, and every structural point was plotted by her hand over 6 months of research. She notes that when the darkness covered her work, she did not abandon her duty or give up on the neighborhood. She states that her father and she spent the entire night using analog optical refraction to trace the lines from the back. She tells the panel that software did not build this city, but real people did with their own sweat. She concludes that what they see on this paper is the absolute, uncorrupted truth of that historical space. Chairman Nguyen, who had been completely silent the entire morning, suddenly rises straight up from his leather chair. His eyes are locked onto the lower right-hand corner of the massive blueprint canvas, his face turning pale. To hold the long canvas straight during the frantic tracing session, I had used his old, scarlet limewood ruler as a guide. In her extreme haste, Mai's ink pen had caught the edge of the ruler's deep, historical notch in the margin. It left a unique, unmistakable, double-line signature path with a tiny geometric cross-hatch mark at the base of the scale. It was the exact technical signature mark used by the master draftsmen of the State Mapping Bureau 30 years ago. Chairman Nguyen's hands begin to tremble violently, his expensive leather folder dropping to the floor. He walks down from the judge's platform, moving toward the stage like a man seeing a ghost rise from the grave. Khan thinks the chairman is furious at the student, stepping alongside him quickly with an eager smile. Khan promises that he will personally ensure she is removed from the university campus immediately by security. Chairman Nguyen turns his head slowly, his voice dropping to a sudden, sharp whisper that cuts Khan off completely. He commands Khan to shut his mouth. Power is nothing more than a temporary lease, granted by the shifting hands of time. The man who sits comfortably at the very top of the high mountain often forgets the jagged gravel he had to climb over just to get there. But when he is suddenly confronted with the long-forgotten foundation stone of his own existence, his grand illusion of height completely disappears. He is forced to remember the exact hand that once saved him from being absolutely nothing. Chairman Nguyen stands mere inches away from the giant wooden display board, his breathing suddenly shallow and ragged under the bright lights. His expensive gold ring catches the harsh illumination of the auditorium as his trembling index finger gently reaches out. He traces the unique, notched double line left in the lower right-hand margin of the heavy cotton paper. The old memories flood his mind like a breaking dam, and his voice drops to a rough, deeply emotional whisper. He murmurs about the double-line refraction alignment, the iron gall ink fluorescence, and this exact, unmistakable jagged notch. He states that this notch did not come from a standard drafting pen or any modern digital machine. He declares to the silent room that it came from a specific limewood straight edge that was burned by a falling beam of seasoned oak in the freezing winter of 1996. He turns around with agonizing slowness, his eyes fully locked onto Mai's face. The cold, calculated corporate mask has completely slipped from his features, replaced by a raw, ancient vulnerability that none of his board members have ever seen. He demands to know who helped her build the optical apparatus last night, and who directed the intense light beam for this trace. Mai stands completely still, her chin held high, as she answers that it was her father. Nguyen. She defines him as the master technician of the old optical repair cellar in the 3rd District. A collective, sharp gasp echoes through the older members of the university professor panel sitting at the leather table. They instantly remember the legendary name from the